The shadows of a vanished empire stretch across time. The cold winds of fate whisper through the ruins of ancient cities, where the echoes of lost queens still haunt the dark corners of history. It was not just the clash of armies that shaped the world. It was the brutal silence that followed the silence that fell upon those who dared defy Rome. A silence so profound, it consumed their very essence. The year is 272 CE. The city of Antioch, a place of grandeur and ambition, stands on the edge of its own destruction. Queen Zenobia, a woman who dared to challenge the might of the Roman Empire, finds herself at the heart of this storm. Her once mighty kingdom, a vast empire that stretched from Egypt to Anatolia, is crumbling beneath the iron heel of Rome's legions. In a final, desperate attempt to escape, she flees toward Persia, her fate sealed. But what awaits her is not a swift death, nor a noble end, but something far worse. The Romans had perfected the art of destruction, not of kingdoms, but of the very soul. Scene 2, the cold reality of Roman law to Rome. There were no exceptions. No nobility, no gender, no royal blood could shield a defeated ruler from the crushing force of Roman law. Captives, once free men and women, now existed in a legal void, stripped of dignity, humanity, and their former status. The concept of jus gentium, the law of nations, declared that any captured queen, any fallen monarch, was nothing more than property. No longer a ruler, no longer a queen, but a thing. A mere object to be displayed, used, and disposed of at will. This is the fate that awaited Zenobia. The very notion of mercy had been erased from the Roman psyche. The Roman Empire, vast and merciless, had no place for weakness, no room for compassion. Under Roman law, even the grandest of queens was reduced to the same legal status as the lowliest soldier in her defeated army. All their rights, the rights of Roman citizens, meant nothing. They had no voice, no protection, no hope. Scene 3, the triumph of humiliation. The Romans were masters of spectacle. Their triumphs were not just celebrations of military victories. They were a display of power show for the masses, meant to strike terror into the hearts of their enemies. The triumphal procession was a slow march of horror, a procession that turned the humiliation of the defeated into an art form. The streets of Rome would be lined with citizens, eagerly awaiting the grand parade of captured prisoners, the spoils of war. They came to witness not just the fall of empires, but the fall of dignity itself. Zenobia would march, bound in golden chains that once represented the wealth of her kingdom, now transformed into the instruments of her degradation. The weight of these chains was symbolic. It was not just about restraint. It was a statement. The chains were a testament to her fall, to the empire she had once ruled and the power she had once commanded. As she walked through the streets of Rome, every step she took was a reminder to the people, a reminder that no one, not even a queen, was safe from the might of Rome. The royal garments she wore, once a symbol of power, now served as a cruel mockery of her defeat. The crowds jeered, their eyes drinking in her humiliation. She was no longer a queen. She was a spectacular, living monument to the empire's absolute control, seen for the psychological terror of captivity. But it was not just the physical chains that bound Zenobia. It was the terror of the unknown, the uncertainty of what awaited her once the triumph was over. Some queens, like Zenobia, were spared immediate execution, kept alive as trophies to symbolize the empire's supremacy. Others, less fortunate, met their end in the dark, cold dungeons of Rome, their fate sealed behind stone walls that still stand today. the ancient Tullianum prison, a grim reminder of the Roman Empire's brutality, awaited those who did not have the fortune of surviving the triumph. Here, in the damp and dark depths of the dungeon, the most notorious enemies of Rome were left to die, some by starvation, others by suffocation. The final moments of these rulers were spent in silence. Their cries lost to history as the city above them celebrated the empire's victory. Scene 5. A woman's defiance. Zenobia, however, was different. Her defiance in the face of such cruelty did not go unnoticed. As she marched through the streets of Rome, weighed down by the chains that symbolized her fall, she maintained a sense of dignity. There was no screaming, no begging for mercy. Instead, she held her head high, her eyes steady. It was this defiance that would ultimately save her life. The Emperor Aurelian, perhaps moved by her strength, or perhaps calculating that her continued existence would serve his purposes better than her death, spared Zenobia the fate that most defeated rulers faced. Instead of a quick execution, she was granted a villa near Rome, a reminder that even in captivity, she remained a symbol. A living reminder of the empire's total power, a trophy that could be displayed, admired, and used. But was this mercy, or was it a more insidious form of humiliation? The choice to spare her was not one of kindness. It was a calculated move to further solidify Aurelian's dominance. Zenobia would live out her days under Roman control, her every move a reminder that even the mightiest queens could be reduced to nothing. Her daughters, once heirs to an empire, would marry into Roman aristocracy, further cementing the symbol of Roman power over her. Scene 6. The fates of other captive queens. Zenobia's fate was not unique. History is filled with stories of queens who, like her, were captured, paraded, and humiliated. One such queen was Boudica, the fierce queen of the Iceni tribe in Britain. When her husband died, the Romans took advantage of her weakness, violating her will, seizing her land, and reducing her to nothing. When Boudica protested, the Romans responded with violence, flogging her in public, stripping her of all dignity, and violating her daughters. But Boudica's response was not one of submission. Instead, she raised an army and led a revolt against the Romans. Her rebellion would burn Roman cities to the ground, but it would also end in defeat. Like Zenobia, Boudica's fate was sealed. But unlike Zenobia, Boudica chose to end her life on her own terms. The fate of her daughters remains unknown, lost to the annals of history. The brutality that these queens endured was not an anomaly. It was a deliberate part of Rome's conquest strategy, to break their enemies, to send a message to the world. The Romans needed to destroy not just the body, but the spirit. They needed to show that no kingdom was beyond their reach, no throne was secure, and no dignity was safe from their grasp. Scene 7. The fall of power. As Zenobia's chains clinked in the streets of Rome, as Boudica's tears stained the earth beneath her, the Romans showed the world the true cost of empire. They did not just conquer lands and peoples, they conquered hearts and minds, bending not just bodies, but the very soul of their enemies. The trauma of defeat, the stripping away of identity and dignity, was more than just a punishment. It was a weapon that lingered long after the battle had ended, long after the legions had marched off to new conquests. Part 1 of this dark tale ends here, but the story of these fallen queens, their humiliation, their defiance, and their eventual erasure from history serves as a chilling reminder of the brutal realities of conquest. Their names live on, but their dignity was taken from them. Their stories endure, but the price they paid for their defiance is one that can never truly be forgotten. As the golden chains of Zenobia clinked through the streets of Rome, her fate was far from certain. She had not yet passed through the crucible of the Tullianum, nor had she been sacrificed in the temple of Jupiter. Instead, she was made to walk, a living display of Roman supremacy. Her every step a testament to the humiliation of a fallen queen. But what was her future now? Was she merely a pawn in a game of imperial power? Or was there something darker at play, a calculated cruelty meant to twist her very existence into a symbol of Rome's absolute domination? In the dark, ancient corners of Rome, the whispers began. Some believed Zenobia had been spared to serve as a living monument, a reminder to all who saw her that no power, no matter how great, could stand against Rome's might. The golden chains were not just a physical restraint. They were a representation of the empire's ability to turn any queen, any ruler, into an ornament of their strength. She was no longer the ruler of an empire, but an exhibit. Her chains, the defining feature of her identity. Her daughters, once the heirs of a kingdom, now wed into Roman aristocracy, their mother's disgrace intertwined with their future. They were to be pawns too, but not in the way Zenobia had once envisioned. The matrimony was not a union of alliances, but an act of absorption, of transforming the proud, the once powerful, into mere extensions of Roman control. Scene 2, a tale of silence and blood. Zenobia was not alone in her fall. The history of the empire is filled with queens who, like her, found themselves at the mercy of the Roman conqueror. Boudica, queen of the Iceni tribe in Britain, had long fought for her people's independence. Yet, when her husband passed, the Romans violated his will, seizing his land and kingdom. Boudica, enraged by this violation, led her people in rebellion. The result was a brutal crushing of her revolt by the Romans. But the true horror of Boudica's story was not just in her defeat, but in the torment her royal bloodline endured. She was flogged, her very body a public statement of Rome's absolute power over her. It was not enough to defeat her on the battlefield. Her humiliation was made public for all to see. But it didn't stop there. The Roman soldiers went further. Her daughters, barely more than girls, were subjected to unspeakable acts of violence, their innocence shattered for all to witness. It was a calculated humiliation meant not just to punish, but to break the spirit of an entire people, as Tacitus recorded. The violation of Boudica's daughters became a central element of the rebellion that followed. The Romans had intended to crush the Iceni spirit, but they miscalculated. The abuse and public display of violence only fueled Boudica's rage, igniting a fire that nearly burned the empire from Britain's shores. It was not just a battle for territory, it was a battle for honor. And, tragically, honor was what Boudica lost most. Her daughters, silent witnesses to the horrors, faded into obscurity, their fates forever unknown. Scene 3, the Tullianum's dark embrace as Rome reveled in its triumph. The defeated rulers, those who had once commanded armies, who had once sat upon thrones, met their fates in the shadowy depths of the Tullianum. This ancient prison, a dark pit carved into the heart of the city, served as the final resting place for many of Rome's enemies. It was a place of silence, a place where the cries of the condemned echoed through the damp, cold air, unheard by the celebrants above. One such figure was the chieftain of the Gauls, who had unified his tribes against the might of Julius Caesar. After his defeat at the Battle of Alesia in 52 BCE, he was paraded through Rome as part of Caesar's triumph. 6 years had passed since his capture, and by the time he reached the streets of Rome, Vercingetorix had been broken. His body was gaunt, his spirit all but shattered. He had been reduced to nothing more than a shadow of the man who had once led his people to war. His final moments in the Tullianum were marked by a slow, agonizing death. The method varied. Some died by suffocation, others starved, but the result was the same. A leader who had once commanded armies, whose name had inspired fear across the empire, now died alone, his cries lost in the stone walls as Rome celebrated its victory above. Vercingetorix's story is but one among many. The Tullianum was filled with the broken remnants of once proud rulers, their names and legacies erased by the empire's cold indifference. For those who were deemed useful, there was a different fate. Some would live, but as living trophies, symbols of Rome's unyielding dominance. Scene 4: the cold silence of the prisoner. The true horror of Roman conquest was not always in the battles fought or the blood spilled. It was in the silence that followed. The cold, oppressive silence of a prisoner who knew that, regardless of their royal blood or noble title, they were no longer human in the eyes of Rome. They were tools, objects, symbols of the empire's supreme power. Zenobia, in her chains, was a walking monument to that power. She may have survived her imprisonment, but she would never escape the chains that defined her existence. And it was not just her. It was every captured queen, every defeated ruler who had once commanded armies, who had once sat at the pinnacle of their kingdoms, only to be reduced to mere trophies in the Roman game of conquest. The fate of these queens was not an accident. It was a carefully crafted strategy designed to instill fear, to break resistance, and to demonstrate the absolute might of the Roman Empire. By degrading them, by stripping them of their humanity, the Romans sent a message that rippled far beyond the streets of Rome. The message was clear: no one was safe, not even a queen. Scene 5: the final reckoning. The fall of Zenobia was not just a political event, it was the culmination of centuries of Roman conquest and cruelty. The empire's ability to crush and degrade its enemies was not limited to the battlefield. It extended to the very essence of those who dared to challenge Roman authority. The execution of captured rulers, the public humiliation of queens, the systematic erasure of royal dignity, all of this was part of the Roman strategy to maintain control. The triumphs, the processions, the parades, they were all part of a larger psychological war. The empire was not merely interested in defeating its enemies. It sought to break their spirits, to leave them with nothing but the bitter taste of their own humiliation. As Zenobia's golden chains glinted in the sun, as the crowds cheered and celebrated her fall, it was not just her personal tragedy being played out. It was the tragedy of an entire people. A reminder that in the eyes of Rome, no one, no matter how noble, was beyond reach. No one's dignity was too sacred to be defiled. Scene 6: the unwritten stories. For every queen like Zenobia, there were countless others whose stories remain untold, lost to the shadows of history. The women who once commanded armies, who ruled vast empires, but whose names were swallowed by the dust of time. Some died in the cold embrace of the Tullianum. Others were forgotten in the luxury of Roman villas, their identities buried beneath the weight of their chains. But their suffering, their humiliation, was not in vain. It served as a warning that echoed through the centuries, not just to those who might challenge Rome, but to all who came after. For in the empire's cruelty was its power, and in its power, its fear. Final scene, the legacy of silence. Rome's legacy is not only found in the grandeur of its buildings or the might of its armies. It is found in the silence of its defeated enemies, in the broken bodies and crushed spirits of those who once stood at the pinnacle of power. The queens who were paraded through its streets, their dignity stolen, their identities erased, these women live on, not as symbols of victory, but as reminders of the brutal cost of empire. In the darkness of the Tullianum, the silence lingers. The stone walls still stand, a haunting reminder of what it means to fall. And as we look upon the ruins of an empire, we are left to wonder how many stories have been lost to time. How many queens, like Zenobia, were reduced to nothing more than whispers in the wind. The price of defiance was high, and for those who dared to resist Rome's might, it was not just their kingdoms that were taken, it was their very souls.